Hi, and welcome to Spoonful of Strength. I'm Rachel, and I live with multiple sclerosis, type 1 diabetes, and a few other diagnoses that keep life interesting.
And I'm Tina. I am a fibromyalgia warrior with chronic back issues and a proud stage 4 cancer survivor. We're sisters, and together we're here to support, inspire, and connect. So if you're new here, the spoon theory explains how we navigate life with limited energy or spoons.
And we're thrilled to share that we've been ranked number 30 on FeedSpot's Top 100 Chronic Illness podcast list. So grab a spoon and let's dig into stories, tips, and a whole lot of strength. Welcome to another episode of Spoonful of Strength. We're so happy to be with you guys today as we are talking about grief and grieving your old self as you go through chronic illness, whether that be physical mobility or new diagnosis of grieving the person that you once were. In part two, we're going to welcome Emily in, and Emily is a young woman that had a stroke at the age of 26 years old, and her story is amazing of how she's been fighting back to regain her left side. And it's going to be a great interview. I'm excited to bring her in. So, Tina, how are things going? How's your week been?
So far, so good. It's a busy week now for me. How about you?
Yeah, this I'm excited for to get back into the podcast. I think I mentioned on last week's episode that I had a very important doctor's appointment on Monday. And I had that appointment, and through some genetic testing, I had a mutation in one of my neuromuscular genes, which is what I've been trying to find out more about the last, gosh, it's been 7 years of having muscle weakness in around my lungs and in various parts of my body. And we did get clarification on that gene mutation as a very rare muscle disease called centronuclear myopathy, which is there's not much about it. There's no treatment, there's no cure. And we are going forward with a muscle biopsy as soon as they can get that scheduled to confirm it and to rule out that there's any other muscle issues going on right now. Ed actually was doing a little bit of research on it, and there's only one other person in the world that has MS and centronuclear myopathy. So
Wow.
we could be looking at some unknowns as far as how that works with MS and also how that works in general with no treatment and no cure. What's that gonna look like?
Yeah.
So we had a rough mental week. I had
Yeah.
very rough time. I had my little tantrum. I reached out to the people I love and leaned on them a lot. And this week I'm trying to breathe, as that's my word of the year. Breathe and not stress until I have something to stress about, and to kind of leave it out there and wait until we have more information to figure it out.
Yeah, that was definitely a tough week, and all you can do is look towards the future, I guess. Huh?
Yeah. And then I think there'll be, depending on what the biopsy shows, if it does show the centronuclear myopathy, they will probably do genetic testing on my three boys who also all have muscle weakness around their lungs. So it could open up, possible diagnoses for them.
Yeah. I remember it. I remember when you first, that was like you said, a number of years ago when you first started having the muscle weakness, and calling me um, when you were told that you may have another, on top of MS, another thing going on. So I know
It's been a long
this has
journey.
been a while.
it's been a long journey just getting an answer,
Mm-hmm.
um, which I am sure can be difficult, yet also kind of not, I wouldn't say relief, but at least like the not knowing part can also be difficult, I guess is.
Yeah. I, in one of my moments last week, and I think Ed's taken it a little bit harder than I expected him to. I feel like it's affecting him a little bit more, but I told him, I'm like, I've wanted an answer for so long, but now that I feel like I might be close to it, now I'm scared. I don't want to know.
Right,
So,
right. Especially being told that it's something that there's no treatment, right? Currently, there's no
yeah,
treatment or no cure.
yeah. So I'll keep you all updated as things go. Hopefully, by the next episode, we'll know when the biopsy is and we'll go from there. So, well, the topic we have today, I think, is pretty important, don't you think, Tina? As far as the
Yes.
emotional changes we go through from chronic illness. So, do you think that, they've got like, what is it, the five stages of grief? Do you feel like with chronic illness, especially in your journey with cancer, did you feel like that you went through different stages as you were maneuvering the diagnosis and the treatment and all that?
Um, I don't feel like I necessarily did, but I also went in with a different mindset from the
Mm-hmm.
get-go, that most people don't. I can definitely see where many people would go through that, though. Just not maybe not necessarily, because it says denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance of the five stages. Um, but maybe not so much denial, but disbelief, maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Might be a big one of, oh, maybe the scans were wrong. Maybe they were, and that part I do kind of remember, when the emergency room doctor came and said, this is what we found. It's likely stage 4 cancer, but you'll need more tests before we can determine that. Um, so I do think I definitely had a bit of disbelief, or
Mm-hmm.
of going, okay, well, maybe he's wrong. Maybe these other scans will be like, nope, it's something else. So
Mm-hmm.
how about you with your MS diagnosis?
I wonder for so many people that go through a long diagnosis, sometimes I feel like you've waited so long that almost we know what's coming before we get the diagnosis. I see that with a lot of people posting, like I'm almost positive this is POTS, or I have all the symptoms of this, and the doctors aren't getting the diagnosis. And so I feel like with MS, I didn't have so much of a denial part of it because even the doctor, months and probably a year or so before was kind of saying, yeah, it could be MS, and then, oh, it might be MS. And so for a lot of people with chronic illness, because the diagnosis process is so slow, I wonder if that's more so like in your case where it was kind of a surprise diagnosis. Um,
Hmm.
I think that looking over the last, what it's 10 years, it'll be 10 years in October, since I was diagnosed with MS. I feel like sometimes it goes in waves as far as grief, whether that be mobility. Recently my mobility has taken a dive, and so there's a grieving process to that. There's an adjustment to that. There's some mental health issues when you're dealing with that. So I feel like it's a constant wave of grief depending on how you're feeling, and how, if it's a progressive disorder, how that is progressing as well. I think I've come to
Yeah.
accept that I have MS, but I think it's accepting the changes that is continuing through the years.
hmm And I think with yours, or like you said, talking about the long journey to the diagnosis, it's, do you feel that maybe the grief process was actually part of the leading up to the diagnosis? Like the grieving as far as not knowing what's going on or suspecting and just not getting that. I always say that one of my biggest things with my cancer journey was that I felt like once because it took them a while to figure out the best battle plan for my
Hmm.
situation, but once they finally said, okay, this is what we decided that we feel like is going to give you the best chance, and here's our plan, that was like a weight lifted off my shoulders, or
Hmm.
to where I was
Yeah.
like, okay, now I'm ready. Now I'm ready to fight. And that was really when I always tell people that are new in that journey, it feels like things are not moving fast enough, but it's moving so fast when you really look back and think about that. But even just be waiting like 2, 3 weeks to figure everything out was difficult, but knowing something else is going on and waiting for that diagnosis for some people for years of finally getting
Hmm.
that, then, like you said, it could just be the fact that, you've already kind of gone through a bit of that
Yeah.
process.
Yeah. And I think, I'm what is it? Almost 7 years into this muscle issue. And
Hmm
so now that I'm getting close, because the genetic report showed a variant which could be linked to something called centronuclear myopathy. Now I'm like, well, this is moving quick. I've been
Right.
dealing with this for 7 years, not knowing if it was MS related or uh, what it was. And so now that I had that appointment like 2 weeks, so now I'm almost slow down. Because I don't want to know, because if if it is centronuclear myopathy, there is no cure, there is no treatment. So, and it's so rare that, like, I don't know. I don't like being in a position where I have something that I can't do anything about. And so now I'm in this stage where I'm like, okay, this is all happening too fast, and I
hmm
don't really want to know now, after all these
Yeah.
years. But you
Right.
know,
Now, do you almost feel that, or are you almost hoping that it actually comes back and it's not that? Would you almost rather go back to the drawing boards of going, because it is something that's not treatable and not curable? Um,
um, I I think what's so frustrating about it is that if you look on the MS Society, the National MS Society website, and you look at MS, and I hadn't done this in forever, but I went on there this past weekend, and it said less common symptoms of MS include breathing problems and stiffness and muscle weakness. And I'm like, but all these years I've been told, no, it's not MS. But anybody else besides my neurologist has kind of said, well, wait a second, nerves control the muscles. So I don't understand how it can't be something. And so I think
mhm,
if it comes back clean, then I'm just going to say I'm kind of done. The only reason I would keep going is because all three of my sons have reduced weakness in their lungs. So sometimes I feel like I'm charging forward for them. Like, I'll be the pincushion, I'll be the person that can take it, because if they find something in the biopsy, then they'll test the kids. And so I'm, at that point I'm like, I'm going to do it. But it is scary. And recently, with a lot of mobility changes, kind of getting back to our our subject is I have been grieving a lot because I see a lot of changes in things I could physically do. And I also, looking at the future, I've made such a progress in the last 6 months with decline. Like, what do the next 6 months look like? And so I feel like I'm in that right now of the grieving, the things I used to do with ease. And I think there's a lot of losses when it comes to chronic illness, as far as I've always been a homebody. I'm not one to just jump up and go out and and go to the bar or go out to lunch or go shopping. Yeah, I like being home, but I imagine if you have somebody who is very social, like that would be something that would be very hard. As I imagine, I've heard, people losing friends just over the fact that they can't get out and do the things that their friends may want them to do.
That is so spot on with what I went through from October until just recently with the sciatic and chronic
Mm,
back pain, was that I was sidelined for so much. And
mm,
I'm go, 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 go. And I wasn't going out playing fly ball. I wasn't going out with friends because I couldn't drive anywhere. I obviously was not going out hitting the bars or going out meeting friends
mm,
for drinks that happen fairly often, or a drink, because I was on so many pain meds, the and muscle relaxers, that I was obviously not mixing alcohol with that, and I really really struggled.
have you lost friends because of that?
No. Feel I have. No. I during my cancer journey, I had one kind of disappear on me for a while.
Hmm.
Um, and then once I finished on my treatments, she kind of circled back around, and that was when she told me that it was hard for her to
Mm,
see what I was going through. And that was really hard for me. So if you're a caregiver, or a friend, or a family member, loved one of somebody that is dealing with that, don't be afraid to let them know that that's
hmm.
the case. That, okay, sorry, this is really hard for me as well, versus just disappearing, because
Yeah.
because that really hurts. Really, really hurts when it's people that you feel like are going to be ones that you have this in your mind. When you're with those initial diagnoses, you kind of also get that, okay, this is going to be my crew. These are the ones that I know I'm going to be able to rely on and help me get through this. And then when they disappear with no explanation,
Yeah.
that's hard.
Yeah. And I wonder if sometimes, if it is hard for her to see you in that position, if there were things that she could have done, reaching out via text or sending food, or things that she didn't have to be right by your side, you know,
Right. Right.
that
Yeah.
that that's so hard. But and of course we have to talk about the fact that losing jobs or not being able to do the job that you once had. And I will tell you that the hardest part of my MS journey was the 2 to 3 years after I stopped working, because it was such a hit to my mental state, as far as being able to contribute financially to the family. And I had a lot of pride in my job and the job that I did, and to go from working so hard and so many hours to just a standstill was really a blow to who I thought I was. And
Hmm.
I went through many years. And honestly, I think that if I didn't go through therapy, I think that Ed and I would have gotten divorced, because it affected our relationship so bad. And I take most of the responsibility in that because I was so down on myself that it's almost like I wouldn't let him love me. I was so beaten and broken by the fact that I lost a big part of me that I couldn't even accept goodness from him. So it was like I was pushing it away, and it was so difficult to to get back on track, and it took quite a while. Hi, this is Rachel from Spoonful of Strength. My Etsy shop is a chronic illness owned business where I design t shirts, hoodies, mugs, magnets, and more, all with a focus on chronic illness empowerment. Whether you're looking for something cozy, funny, or inspiring, I've got you covered. I also take custom orders because your story deserves to shine. Visit spoonfulofstrength.etsy.com. That's spoonful with 2 L's, and enjoy 25% off your order with the code podcast at checkout. Let's wear our strength with pride, one design at a time. I know working, that's sometimes a part in chronic illness where you realize you can't do your job the way that you used to be able to do, and or you make the decision that you have to put your health first, and your job is you have to prioritize your health before anything else. So I know you probably did you have to you left your job when you were dealing with your treatment, right?
Yeah, I took a leave of absence while I was going through chemotherapy and my surgery and radiation. And so that was, let's see, it would have been from like June. And I believe I started going back part-time a little bit like in the following February after I've went through everything. That was mainly with my oncologist. I was working it was right at the beginning of summer camp season when I was going through my chemotherapy. I was the camp director, and talking to my oncologist, I said, "What do you think about this? I'm going to be around at least 60 kids on a daily basis while going through this."
Yeah.
And she's like, "No, no, not a good idea." And then I went back in 2019. Eventually, it took me a while to work back into being ready to go back full time. Um, and then 2020, summer of 2020, we still had summer camp with a lot of much more restrictions during
Yeah.
COVID, and really had to change the scope. And that ended up being an extremely stressful situation. And that was that was when I had the reoccurrence in the lymph node. And I really feel strongly that it was just that the the level of stress that I was dealing with from work had a big impact on that coming back.
Hmm.
Um, so that was when I left.
Yeah.
And then I
Yeah.
tried going back to work summer of 2023 in another position, um, doing at a working with kids again in an outdoor setting. But that was when I ended up with the back injury. So I left after that, realizing that that my back just can't
Hmm.
at that point, was not able to do it. So I've had to leave a couple times based on that. And you were, I think we were having a planning meeting that day that I happened to log in to look up something on my record, remember, few weeks ago or a month ago or so. And I was like, oh, it says right here in my record that I have chronic back pain. And I just struggled with that so much forever because I was like, I don't want another chronic condition.
Yeah.
And I don't, I really had a hard time with that. So that was another, like, I think every new diagnosis, which so many chronic illness warriors out there have multiple diagnoses.
Hmm.
And I feel like that it almost resets or builds on that grieving process of every time something new comes in.
Yeah. I'm glad that you mentioned that because it is. different when you see it in print. And when I
Mhm.
went to my neuromuscular doctor, and he's the one that's ordered this muscle biopsy, I was looking at his notes on my chart, and I told Ed, I said, "Oh my gosh, he put my diagnosis as centronuclear myopathy." And I'm like, but I don't have that yet. Like I was almost panicking. I'm like, why did he put that on there? Because we haven't proven it yet. And it made it a little bit more real seeing that in print. So I think that does make a difference. During your cancer treatment, were there any sort of coping mechanisms that you had as far as just things that would try and reduce your stress, or ways to deal with maybe a difficult treatment or a stressful event? How did you handle
Mhm.
those?
Um, One answer that a lot of spoonies end up giving us is meditation, mindfulness. I found
Hmm.
mindfulness, but I've always found, even before all of this, I've always found a lot of peace out in nature and near our
Yeah.
house, like literally on the other side of our driveway. It's not much, not even probably maybe point 0.1, point 0.2 miles. There's a little trail that goes through a little patch of woods, like literally right next to our house. So even on the days that I was not feeling physically well enough to be able to go out and drive anywhere or go for a hike that might tire me out, I was still able to go out there and kind of felt like it was my little escape into nature.
Hmm.
Um, that really helped settle me.
Yeah.
Or even
Yeah.
just sitting out around the fire pit, or sitting out on the deck having my morning coffee, things like that helped me a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. I used to, for gosh, quite a few years, my daily routine, I would take a bath every night and just soak. And that was kind of my relief from the stress of the day. Ever since I had my shoulder surgery last summer, I couldn't take a bath for a while. And then I tried to get in the tub, and it was so painful, just with the stiffness and the muscle issues that I've been experiencing, that I can't, it's like I can't do that again anymore. It hurts too much to try and get in the tub, and it's harder to get in and out of. And so I feel like I lost that. That was a good wind down for me. And I'm not sure that I've necessarily replaced it. I have started doing like adult like coloring. That's been kind of something just to de-stress, which has been helpful. Um, but that's another situation where I'm like grieving the fact that, I'm taking showers with a shower chair, that and can't
Mhm.
enjoy something that I love doing. And something as simple as that bothers me, that's too much for, what I can physically do. And I think
Do.
even small things like that affect you,
Hmm.
in a
Yeah.
big way.
Yeah. Yeah. Even the smallest little thing.
Yeah, it can trigger that emotion of, oh, I can't do this now. And
Yeah.
I can't do, I used to be able to, 6 months ago, I could drive to the store and get, 10, 12 things, and then I could go return something at another store, and I would come home and I was tired. But it's to the point now where I can only go to the store if I need just like three or four things, because and I have to go right home, because that's enough to kind of wear me out, so to speak.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Having to make those accommodations
Yeah.
that you're
Yeah.
not used to having to do.
What's a good way to deal with all the emotions? I feel like I will let my emotions get the better of me, but lately I feel like I've given myself more permission to cry over things.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, and understanding the depths of the things that I've lost and allowing myself to do that. And then that sometimes helps me release it and then try and get in a better attitude of, you know what, I'm still here today. So, you know, it sucks, but you know, I'm here. So I wouldn't trade that.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yep. I always say, at least I'm here to complain about it.
That's right.
At
That's right.
least I'm still here to complain about it. And because it can be hard to navigate. And you said something that absolutely love, because I do feel that a lot of us struggle with that, is you're giving yourself more permission to cry, because having
Yeah.
that release is so, so important. And that is one thing that I did do a lot of. With my initial cancer diagnosis, those first few days is, I would get these moments, I would be fine and just resting on the couch or whatever. And then I just get this overwhelming wave of emotion. Um, so I would just, go wander back to the bedroom so nobody would see me do it, and just
Mhm.
lay down and cry. I had just,
Yeah.
release them. Um, because it's hard to, not just emotionally, but physically, holding emotions in, that strong of emotion and that amount of grief is not healthy.
Yeah. Yeah. It'll come out either way. So if it
Yeah.
comes out crying, that's great. You don't want it to come out as anger towards somebody or in other unhealthy ways. How do you find your identity after going through something as traumatic as cancer or chronic illness, knowing that
I
you're never going to be that old self again?
a big part of, well, one thing that you mentioned is, you saw a therapist, and that's a very, very important factor, I believe, of if you're
Yeah.
struggling with that. But also because that will help. I feel like that's going to help with my next spot here, or my point of where I'm going with, is realizing that your job was not your identity.
Yeah. Yeah.
The people who may have, um turned their back, they're no longer, they're not there, they're not part of the support system that you were needing. They weren't part of your identity either.
Yeah. Yeah.
Your identity is who you are on a soul level, and who you are as a person. Any of the other outside things are just things that you did, things you enjoy.
Yeah. Yeah. It took a while to learn that, to realize that I'm, I remember in therapy, and I said this over and over and over. Ed and I would do therapy together. Like I said, we had a lot of issues because of it, of my diagnosis and leaving my job. And I remember more than once saying, I feel so bad because he didn't ask for this. Like, we got married, and yes, I understand in sickness and in health, but he doesn't deserve this. He didn't sign up for this. And my therapist would look at me and said, "And you did? Like, did you like make the decision to get MS and make the decision that you wanted this awful disease?" But at that point, I was so undeserving of anything. I felt undeserving, and that was all through my self-talk. But I've been able to, through therapy, understand that this is not my fault. I'm not, this is not the place that I wanted to be, but I can either keep dwelling on the fact that, oh, poor me, I've got this, and this is so bad, and all those things. Or I can say, okay, well, this is an opportunity for me to live my life differently given the circumstances I've been given. And that's not something you can just do. So, I will say therapy I know can be expensive. A little tip, my therapist constantly has interns in. And he said it was a way for him to see whether or not he wanted to hire them, is to have them come in as interns and they work under. And some of them will charge like $25 a session or $15 a session. And so if you if you don't have insurance that covers it, or you think it can be really expensive, look out for some of those opportunities, because it is really, really important. And it made a profound difference for me. So finding that new identity for me, I don't know where I would be if I had the mindset that I had 5 years ago. I would
Mhm.
not be where I'm at today. And I certainly wouldn't be handling this new situation the way I'm handling it now.
Also, there's a lot of support groups,
Hmm.
locally in person or online. So that's also can be a really good, helpful tool without having to pay money out of your pocket to do that
And come on
as
and
well.
come on and join Spoonful of Strength on Instagram and Facebook.
Yeah.
We've got a good community of a whole lot of different chronic illnesses, and you can find people to connect with. And I think I feel like the chronic illness community has blown up in the last couple of years of creating the communities to support people. And you can find communities
Mhm.
specific to your illness, or you can find more general um, communities as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I would love to hear from some of our listeners of some of the things that have helped them through their grieving process and coming to acceptance of their chronic illness. If you're so inclined, leave a comment and tell us how you have maneuvered through that process for
Mhm.
you. So that is all we have today. And now our wonderful spoony guest that's joining us today is Emily, and she is a stroke survivor. She was only 26 years old when she had her stroke, so she's going to join us now and talk to us about her story. Welcome to our podcast, Em. We are so excited to have you joining us today. How have you been feeling?
Doing okay, baseline as we all are probably. But no,
Yeah.
I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
How about taking a few minutes? Let's take a few minutes and introduce yourselves. Tell our listeners a little bit about you, and your background. You're a stroke survivor.
Yes.
So we're really excited to have you sharing your story with us today.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. So I'm Emily. I live in the Toronto area, Canada. And yeah, so my story starts about 2 years ago, just over. I was homesick from work. I was a teacher at the time, with what I thought was just the flu. I had regular flu symptoms, fatigue, muscle aches. I had a really bad headache and neck pain. But we thought nothing of it. I was home with my parents. I lived with them at the time. But yeah, so we thought nothing of it. I thought, I'm 26. What could it possibly be? I felt fine. It was just regular flu. It wasn't until I got to standing up and tried walking to the bathroom that I realized I needed assistance walking to the bathroom. And that's when we called the ambulance and figured something else is happening here. So then when I got to the hospital, then they confirmed, yes, you're having a stroke, a pretty massive one. So it ended up paralyzing my left side of my body. So since then, I've had to relearn how to walk. And then I'm still currently working on my left hand and arm is my main struggle right now, getting that back to mobility. But yeah, so that's
Mhm.
been my journey the last 2 years, is recovering from my stroke and probably for many more years to come.
Yeah. So at the time you were 26.
Yes.
So walk me through, like, you had this stroke and you went to the hospital, what sort of tests did they do? Where did like those first few days of realizing that
Mhm.
you had a stroke? Walk me through what happened and also mentally, like what
Yeah.
happened.
So initially I was rushed to the hospital closest to where I live. But then they rushed me to a local trauma center in Toronto, Sunnybrook, where they did a procedure. I forget what it's called, but it was basically to remove the clot both in my neck and my brain. So they went in through my thigh to do that. So that was a little scary because there was risk of bleeding, on the brain. So they were questioning whether to do it or not, but they thought it would give me the better outcome. So they did that procedure, and I stayed in ICU for about a week before returning back to my home hospital for where I did inpatient rehab and stayed for a couple months. So in the beginning, honestly, a lot of it was a blur. I was kind of like, what's happening? Because again, I was 26 at the time. I didn't think it was possible to have a stroke that young, but clearly it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they did lots of testing, MRIs, CT scans. They're still actually doing testing to this day because they don't know for sure the cause of my stroke. So most recently, I've had a bone marrow biopsy done. So I've had all the tests. So then I was in the hospital, I guess, from November. So November 24th was my stroke in 2022. I was in the hospital until January 13th and then returned home. I'm still continuing to go to rehab now twice a week,
Okay.
which is good. Mm-hmm.
Hey, Spoonful of Strength listeners. I know we've talked about nutrition on the podcast. Well, we can't forget about our furry friends.
That's right, Rachel. Our pets deserve the same love and care when it comes to what they eat. That's why we're excited to tell you about Space Dog Treats, sold by my business, Magical Mutts Creations.
These treats are made with all natural ingredients crafted right here in the USA and free from unnecessary additives. My dogs love the Salmon Galaxy Bites. They do a happy dance every time they hear the bag crinkle.
Supporting Magical Mutts means supporting a chronic illness-owned business that truly cares. Treat your pup to healthy, nutritious snacks they'll love.
Visit magicalmuttscreations.com today and discover the magic.
Because our furry friends also deserve healthy treats. Looking back now, as you've learned more about the signs of a stroke
Right.
and things, were there any warning signs possibly that leading up to it that maybe you just weren't aware that those were warning signs leading up to that?
Looking back, there could have been like a slight maybe droop in my face, but it wasn't noticeable to the point where I was like, for sure, this is a stroke. And it just wasn't on the top of my head or my parents' head because, again, I was so young. And I cognitively felt completely fine. I have no cognitive deficits from the stroke. And during it, I was like, I'm fine. I refused. I was like, I don't need to go to the hospital. I'm fine. This is just the flu. I feel fine. But yeah, so slight droop in the face, I'd say. And then again, once I stood up, that was the balance. And the left arm weakness to not being able to lift my arm. That's when that came into effect. But in terms of the speech, like that was fine. My speech was fine. It was mostly the arm and maybe slight droop. But yeah, now I know that a massive headache can also be a sign that something's not right. So I had struggled with, prior to my stroke, migraines, possibly related to birth control pill. And then, yeah, it was a really bad headache, worst I've had. And that should have been a sign looking back, maybe, to call sooner, but it's in the past, so.
Did they ever tell you, or do you know what would have happened if you hadn't gone to the hospital when you did?
They never told me, but I mean, there was a chance that I could have just not made it. Or I'm assuming that my deficits that I have now would just be a lot worse than they are. I could still be completely paralyzed on my left side, perhaps. But yeah, I was never really told, but they're just glad I got there when I did.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You mentioned that first week after having your stroke that you were in the ICU. Now, were you cognitive during that time period, or is that kind of all a big blur?
Honestly, most of it is a big blur. I remember being there. I remember people like coming to visit me and whatnot. But the details of it are very blurry. I was on a lot of pain medication as well from that procedure I had done to remove the clot. So it's all a bit fuzzy.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I imagine that they can't give you any promises or anything right at the beginning as far as what you're going to get back. But were you were you told anything by the doctors or the physical therapist about how much you would regain back or what they thought? Or was it just let's see what happens?
They've always been hopeful because of my age, and said, "Oh, you're lucky you're young, because you have a better chance of getting more back." But they did make it clear that the thing with brain injuries is you never really know. You can work at it over and over again, but you don't know what you'll get back. So at this point,
Mhm.
I'm still hopeful, and it's good that I learned how to walk again pretty quickly, and that I was active before my stroke, so it gives me a better chance. But it's still the brain is a interesting
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
And it's mostly
definitely.
now the hand, like the fingers and toes and ankle, like they're furthest from the brain, so they're harder to get back, more pathways to recreate. So I'm trying to
Okay.
stay hopeful, but it definitely gets tough.
I bet.
Have you gone back to teaching, or are you still focused on recovering right now?
So I'm still mostly focused on my recovery. I've not gone back to teaching. I am tutoring, however, like tutor a couple students here and there. So that still keeps me doing something and working with the kids. But I'm not actually sure in terms of work. I'm not sure if I want to go back to teaching. I'm still kind of deciding my next steps for that too, but still focusing on recovery and then figuring out job and financially next steps.
Right. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but about a year after your stroke, you suffered some seizures. Is that right?
Yes, so I had two seizures in the same day. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So
I haven't had
walk
any
me.
since.
Oh, good. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So is that like an isolated incident or is it connected to the stroke
So
or
it's
do they
connected
know?
to the point where I'm technically diagnosed, I guess, with post-stroke epilepsy. So I am
Okay.
on like seizure medication for the foreseeable future. But that
Mhm.
has been the only incident I've had was that one day I had two seizures.
Mhm.
So that was the only day. But honestly, I remember more about the day I had my stroke than I do the seizure. The seizure day is a complete blur. I don't
Yeah.
remember much at all of it.
How long were you in the hospital for those?
I think I stayed about a week just for all the testing and whatnot they had to do. And then I was allowed to
Yeah.
go home. So not too bad.
So you mentioned that they're going to do, did you say muscle biopsy
So I had
or
a bone marrow biopsy.
bone
Yeah, because they're
marrow
still trying to get to
biopsy?
the
And that
bottom of why I had this stroke.
do they feel that potentially once that comes back, that might give them clues on moving forward of the best way for your recovery moving forward, and also to ensure uh, reducing the risk of it occurring again in the future?
Possibly it's mostly just it'll give me answers as to why it happened, is mostly why we want to get to the bottom of it. At this point, the cause that they think is why it happened is a mixture of birth control pill, stress from teaching at the time, as well as I was sick with the flu, which increases chances of blood clots. But the bone marrow biopsy is they're testing for a specific blood mutation called JAK2, I believe.
Mm.
In previous blood work, I've had both positive and negative tests. So they're trying to confirm that. So it could be that this blood mutation, if I have it, could have potentially also contributed. So then if I do have it, then they'll be treating that moving forward to prevent any further issues.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask that as far as, is there a risk once you have a stroke, no matter your age, is there a
Yeah.
risk that it could happen in the future?
I believe there's always a higher chance of having another one, especially when you first have the stroke. I think within the first year, maybe it is, that you have a higher chance of having another one. But the doctors assured me that most likely for me, it was just a fluke and bad luck. So that I'm most likely, because I'm healthy, otherwise, it was just a combination of a lot of little things that added up. So I should be in the clear. I'm on all the right medications and everything. So we're just kind of waiting for this biopsy result, seeing if that needs to be dealt with and moving forward.
As you're working on regaining that, those hands and your feet and, your recovery, what does your daily life look like right now?
Yeah, so a couple times a week I'm in physio. I do adaptive rock climbing every other week. So actually I go this afternoon. So that's another form of physical therapy that I do and enjoy. I tutor once a week. I definitely have my daily naps. The fatigue is quite rough. So I do sleep a lot and stay at home, rest, different at home hobbies, especially in the winter. I read a lot. And then it's just depending on the week, various appointments, time with family and friends. Yeah.
You have a good support system around
Oh, yeah.
you?
Yeah. Oh, no, they're the best. Yeah.
Oh, good. That makes such a difference, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I stalked your Instagram a little bit, I will say. I saw the videos of you rock climbing. I think I would have never thought that would be like a physical therapy that you could do. I mean, I go to physical therapy. I'm going to ask them where's the rock wall so I can try it out. Do you find that doing something like that you enjoy versus traditional exercises that may have increased your recovery a little bit, just because it is more outside of the box and it seems a little bit more fun than some of the traditional exercises you may do?
Yeah, no, I think so. It's definitely more fun than the traditional exercise. Even though I love where I go to physio too, the people there make it great, but the rock climbing gives it a different kind of perspective. So I was also I played soccer before my stroke and was a runner. So having some kind of activity to do versus just exercises has helped quite a lot.
Good.
I think also, rock climbing, I never did it previously to my stroke. So now having something new that I can be like, oh, I can still do this is kind of cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
The adaptive rock climbing, is that like an extension of your physical therapy?
Yeah, so I did it as it was like a free trial day, and then a local organization for brain injury survivors close to me funded like a 6-week program that I tried out. So I did that, and now that I go, now I'm paying for it when I go. It's privately now. But initially, I was covered by a organization close to me, which was very good. And it's for anyone with any disabilities, really. So there's stroke survivors, other brain injury survivors, spinal cord injury, everything. And it was incredible to see everyone being able to climb up that wall, no matter their disability. So that was pretty cool.
That is neat. So do you feel like there's more challenges being physically disabled in your 20s, the way like society can view disabled people, than if you were older? Does that kind of make sense? Like,
yeah, no, yes and no. Like, it's good that I'm younger in terms of my recovery process, but at the same time, yeah, socially, I definitely get more looks, I'd say, because, typically you're used to seeing older people disabled. But there I am walking around with my walking stick and I'm 28 years old. So I definitely get a lot more looks, but I've become more comfortable with it and realize people are just curious. They want to know. Like, they're not always judging, they're just curious.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've gotten better at kind of blocking that out. But yeah, it's definitely tough socially, being the odd one out in the public.
Yeah. I'm just a couple years older than you at 47, but I went through the same thing when I first got like my disabled placard, or I went from using a cane to now a walker. And
Hmm.
it's hard when you feel like people are staring at you
Oh
that,
yeah.
I'm not, I'm mid 40s, so, it's not like I'm really old, but I
Yeah.
still am self-conscious about using assisted devices, or I use a scooter when I'm
Hmm.
grocery shopping and things like that. And it, yeah, I think a lot of mine is self-imposed on,
Yeah, oh for sure, mine
just
too.
being,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, like I really don't think they
Whereas,
mean any harm by it. It's just all in my head,
yeah,
but it's tough.
yeah, me, me
Hmm.
too. Yeah, definitely. Um,
And there's probably a good chance that neither one of you are actually being watched as much as
Yeah.
your
yeah,
Oh,
brain
for
is
sure.
telling you to, because it's just
Yeah.
such an adjustment in
Yeah.
your brain.
Right.
yeah. Well, I was taking a look at kind of your recovery on Instagram, and you had written a poem. This was about a year after your stroke.
Yeah.
And I really resonated with it. I'm going to share it real quick, but it says, "A
Sure.
stranger inside a body I no longer recognize. The eyes staring back at me don't feel like my own. A ghost in the reflection of the girl I used to be before my life was nearly taken from me. I shudder at the thought of no longer being. However, that thought it used to be fleeting. Eviction notice from my own body. I miss my old roommate. Please come back home." I mean, that's beautiful. And I think
Thank you.
that the reason that that resonated with me is because a lot of people with chronic illness or chronic issues feel like they're living in a body that's not
Yeah, not their
what
own.
they expect, or
Hmm.
as 47, I should be able to go for a run. I should be able to do all of these things. And
Right.
so how did you deal with that, especially being as young as you were, to feel like maybe you were trapped inside this body that isn't
Yeah.
reflective of a 26-year-old?
Right. It took a lot of time, a lot of tears, a lot of hard work, and a lot of support from family and friends. But I've gotten to a point where I'm better and I'm accepting of this is my life now, and I'm still hoping to recover more, but I know it's still going to have its long-term effects regardless. So I've gotten to a point where I'm happy with and accepting, I guess, of my life where it is, and just hopeful that I'll get back to doing some of the things I love.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
there's the hard days where I like, damn, I wish I could just go for a run or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, tough.
Yeah.
Especially
Because you
being so
were,
active before my stroke. Now I'm like, huh.
yeah. Because
Hmm.
you ran prior to your stroke, and I saw that you walked a 3 kilometer walk in just a couple months ago, right?
Yeah, back in the fall. It was
That's
a
great.
5K walk for brain injury survivors that I tried. I made it 3K and then I was like, yeah, I'm done.
Oh,
But even
that's
that was
great.
quite a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's the furthest
awesome.
I've walked since my stroke.
Sure. What do you feel is your biggest struggle on a day-to-day basis?
Definitely, I think the my arm being able to do tasks that I forgot how much we need two hands to do. So it's frustrating doing like figuring out and adapting to that. Like putting my hair up is a struggle with only one hand, things like that. But aside from the actual physical disability part, it's the chronic fatigue is also really tricky to manage because my
Hmm.
brain takes so much longer. Takes a lot of work to think through. Like I'll go for a drive. I got my license back, and it takes so much brain power and energy to drive and all the decisions you have to be making while driving. So I go for a drive or I shower or something, and I need to lay down for a little bit.
Hmm.
Just exhausting now, life.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I never thought about how driving, but you're right. It does
Yeah,
take a lot of mental clarity to be able
yeah,
to.
and I have to be on point.
How exciting was that day when you were able to get your license
Oh
back?
God, so exciting! I loved it. Yeah, big step
Oh,
in the freedom and independence.
yeah.
Especially being 26 and being able to drive for I guess a decade. Yeah, 16 I got my license. So
Yeah.
having that taken away was tough, and then it got pushed even uh, longer because I had the seizures a year after. So that
Oh,
took they had to delay it, I think 6 months before I could start the process.
Yeah.
So it took a while to actually get it back. But now that I have it, I drive everywhere.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah, I love it.
So, kind of looking back on the last 2 years, what do you think is like been like the biggest lesson that you've learned? Do you feel like that this happened for a reason? Do you feel like you've learned something from having to go through what you went through 2 years ago?
Yeah. I'm still trying to figure out if I believe in that everything happens for a reason. I mean, I'd like
Yeah.
to believe that, but it's pretty shitty. Like, did it have to happen? But I do think I've grown a lot from it. And I do think I've learned like just how fragile life is. Really makes you think about the little things in life and what's actually important. So I'm definitely more grateful now for what I do have, because I know it could have been a lot worse, the outcome.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. It is hard to sit there and go, well, why is this happening?
I
And,
know. I'm
you
like,
know,
well,
this
what
is
was the
not
reason it
right.
had to happen? But
Yeah. That's a hard one.
yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What advice do you have for those, especially the younger, like those that are younger that have chronic illness or, in your case, the stroke, that you don't really fit into that age norm, so to
Right.
speak? Do you have advice for those that are going through that?
I think honestly, just take it one day at a time. Like, it sucks. It doesn't, like, you can't argue with that, but I promise it does get better. And really rely on the community. Reach out, find other young survivors or young chronic illness warriors. Because there are people out there that can relate and support you, and the more support you have, the better. So I found Instagram was a really great way to reach out and find people. Same with rock climbing. You gotta just find your people and lean on them. And yeah, take it one day at a time. You got this.
Yeah. Do you ever have those moments where you sit back and go, wow, like my body has gone through a lot and I'm like still here and like I'm a badass, you know? Do you ever have that moment where you're like,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I got
yeah,
a tattoo even too, to my
you
warrior
did.
tattoo. Yeah.
Oh, that's good. That's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah, I got that about a year after my stroke.
Good. Good. Well, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you to be able to kind of learn about your story?
Sure. Yeah. So my Instagram is M's stroke of lightning. So it's EMS dot stroke dot of dot lightning. There's just a period in between each word.
Yeah.
I'm sure it'll
That's a
be
great,
linked or
that's a great
something.
name.
But yeah, so it's
I
just
love that.
the lightning bolt is kind of a symbol for stroke. So that's my tattoo has lightning bolts in it. If you feel interested in following my journey.
I think that you're going to continue to do great things and make big improvements.
Thank you. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I
Yeah,
know
no,
that this
thank you
is probably
guys.
going to give you another nap opportunity today.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
I
quick
know
power
it
nap
can.
before rock
Yeah.
climbing.
Yes. Yes. So we know that, you know, doing something like this does take a lot of energy. And so we appreciate that even more. So just take care of yourself and we hope the best for you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you so much for having me
Yeah.
on and for
Right.
sharing all these wonderful stories.
Yeah. We love doing it. So
Yeah.
I always feel like every week that we're ending up going, wow, what a great Spoonie guest. But like, we just keep getting all these awesome, amazing people. I cannot imagine going through such a massive stroke at 26 years old.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, you know, at that young age, I'm sure she's used to bebopping around and having her friends and being able to do all these things, to feel that loss at such a young age and with something that's normally not seen until, you know, midlife. So I can't imagine how she's been able to cope with that so beautifully.
Thank you all so much for tuning in this week on our episode of Spoonful of Strength. And be sure to tune in next Tuesday morning to listen to our episode number 48. Can you believe it's 48? 48 episodes. We're coming in on 50 episodes already. I know, that's insane. So next week we are going to have another Spoonie that joined us on season 2, Bill, and he will be talking about addiction, which is that's a tough, can be kind of a tough topic to talk about and to maneuver through and to find the support that you need that works for you. So he's going to join us and talk about that. And then Lauren will join us after Bill, and she will share her journey with Conradi-Hunerman syndrome. Have a wonderful rest of your week, and we will see you next Tuesday.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Spoonful of Strength. We hope that you found a little inspiration and maybe even a new perspective to carry with you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to hit that like button, follow us for more, and leave a comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts.
And if you're feeling generous, please take a moment to rate and review the podcast. Your support helps us reach more Spoonies just like you.
Until next time, remember to take care of yourself and keep finding strength in your story. Bye for now.
And see you next time on Spoonful of Strength.